Hey everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Road to the ProcureTech Cup. We're kicking the real season off today with Keelvar, and we're going to discuss how to build business cases for sourcing tools. So today's show, all the shows are about how digital procurement professionals or how procurement professionals can build their digital literacy on autopilot. So thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll get straight to it. Before we bring our guest on, I wanted to show you this year's calendar. So the journey of the ProcureTech Cup is going to be from October to April 2026. And we've got today's show, October 10th, with Keelvar. As I just mentioned, Market Dojo came to discuss the power of e-auctions with us as we launched the season and determined who was going to be in this beautiful calendar you see in front of you. And we're going to be discussing how to build business cases, how to build deployment strategies for different types of ProcureTech category solutions, how to build change management plans, how to build governance models around these different types of ProcureTech, and everything will culminate with the ProcureTech Finals virtual conference in April. I have a lot of details to share on that, but I will let them trickle out as the season goes on here. And very excited to be putting on an event this year that's going to go beyond what we've done in the past in terms of the LinkedIn tournament and all that good stuff. So that being said, let's get into the content here. Just a quick poll. So if you're watching, if you're in the chat, I saw Joe Class in there. Hi. Thanks for watching today. So quick poll. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you fix first in your sourcing process? Would you speed up cycle times of how long it takes from requirement to award? Source more categories per year, get better supplier participation, improve your documentation and audit trails, or when I say that you can't pick and choose and you want all of the above, make sure you drop your answer in the chat as we go here, just so we get a sense for what the maturity and people's issues are with sourcing processes today. I also see Yasmina and Salman in the chat. Thanks for being here today. All right, as you're answering the poll here, the agenda. So we'll just cover quickly what is a sourcing tool. So we have a common definition from which to start from. We'll get Keelvar to introduce themselves as one of the sourcing category champions, who's going to educate us during this ProcureTech Cup season on how to be successful with this type of solution. And then we'll get into the meat of it. How do we build a business case for a sourcing tool? First, the benefits, the pain. Where's the pain? Where are the benefits? Then how do we need to think about the costing behind these sourcing solutions? And then the key to success. And I'm selling the punch here, co-creation, right? So not designing your business case alone in a corner, even though it might be beautiful. It needs to be sponsored by all the stakeholders who have a stake in the sourcing process and the sourcing solution. And then we'll wrap things up and get you on your way on this Friday morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're watching from. So that being said, what is a sourcing tool? And before we do that, I just want to bring in Tony Burton, who's the VP of Value Consulting at Keelvar. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Joel. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and do you want to give folks just a quick glance at your background and what brings you to the call today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lead our value consulting team here at Keelvar. I've been in this value consulting space for the last 10 years or so at different tech companies. So, I see a lot of the time companies struggling with this business case element, really trying to justify the investment of bringing in new technology. So yeah, excited to talk through that a little bit more and essentially help companies in building those business cases, right?
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, let me just position what are we talking about when we say a sourcing tool as seen through the lens of my ProcureTech market map at Pure Procurement. If you want to grab a copy of it, you can via the QR code that's there. And if not, well, let's just discuss it here, right? So to me, sourcing fits into the strategic sourcing or strategic procurement process, right? So I'm doing my spend analysis first. I'm looking at my company's huge credit card statement and look at what we're spending. Then I develop category strategies based on that spending. And then we go and execute on those strategies with sourcing initiatives, right? And that's what we want to focus on today, how to build a business case for tools to help you do that faster with better business outcomes. And then everything else flows in afterwards into priceless management, operational purchasing, cutting POs, goods receipts, invoice management, that sort of thing. And then we've got other types of technologies on the bottom, which we'll also cover during the course of the season here. So that's my outside in perspective. I'd love for Tony to give us an inside out perspective on what's a sourcing tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Toby, not Tony, Joel. I get it all the time. No worries. So what we typically see in the market, right, is tools that can address particular aspects of the spend profile. So you'll have tools out there in the market that are very good on the strategic, complex side of things. So really around that advanced sourcing optimization, but really it's too complex to use when we talk about the tactical and tail side of things. And then there are generic e-sourcing solutions out there which struggle to accommodate the very complex things, but also the high volume, low value spend things. And then we've got the more tail solutions that typically struggle with the more complex sourcing events. So really it's important to understand what problems are you trying to solve, and really where are your challenges in that spend profile, and what kind of solution are you typically looking at to solve those problems. So that's really, first of all, what we kind of focus on is getting an understanding of where that prospect and that customer wants to focus when it comes to that spend.
And can I ask for like an example of something that's complex and fit for purpose in sourcing optimization versus how that would compare to a tail spend example?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about strategic events, we're typically talking about the very large events that could have thousands, tens of thousands of line items and different combinations with, a very high volume of suppliers that are participating in that event. So to analyze all that data, you need sophisticated sourcing optimization technology. Whereas when you talk about more the tactical or ad hoc or tail side of things, typically, that can be one or even just two line items with a handful of suppliers that needs to be acted upon very quickly, but doesn't necessarily have the complexity built into that in understanding what those optimal outcomes could be.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that says it all, right? And for folks who are watching as well, if you have questions for Toby and I am monitoring the chat, right? So you can ask questions and I'll ask them on your behalf to Toby here. And yeah, so feel free to ask as we go along here.
Yeah, so here at Keelvar, right, we try to address that full spend profile. And you can see here, we talk about the strategic end, so the left-hand side there, that's typically what you would go after with sourcing optimizer. So the product that Keelvar offers here. And then when we get down to more of the ad hoc to tactical tail side of things, that's really where the autonomous sourcing element comes in to help automate a lot of those requests and remove the manual effort that comes with that. So just to give you a little bit more background around Keelvar. So we are a best of breed e-sourcing solution, and the company is headquartered in Cork in Ireland, and we've been operating since about 2012. And really our mission here is to help procurement teams globally scale sourcing excellence. And you can see, as I've talked about, the core products on the platform are sourcing optimizer and autonomous sourcing. So as I said, sourcing optimizer is for the large, complex sourcing events, right, where there's thousands of line items, a high volume of suppliers, and it's helping sourcing teams get to the optimum best outcomes for that sourcing event. And then autonomous sourcing is really about automating the simpler sourcing events to help increase spend under management, drive more savings, drive efficiencies, and actually bring more competitive bidding to that lower value spend. And we're very proud actually recently to be acknowledged by Gartner as the only vendor that offers both advanced sourcing optimization and autonomous sourcing in a single platform. So yeah, we're very proud of that accolade, and that's what we'll talk about a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, and one thing I love from what you've shown so far is that I haven't seen AI anywhere, right? And so I know people are asking themselves the question, so I'd love to give you the opportunity to say, like, when we talk about automation, for example, like or even in optimization, right? Where are you seeing the benefits of AI in this suite, right? Or in the different types
Yeah,
of
absolutely. So AI, I mean, is littered throughout the platform, right? Even in sourcing optimizer, and when it comes to creating the bid sheets, right, and just very easily drag and dropping in a bid sheet in any style, and it will get it into the right format, ready to run that event in Keelvar, through to creating formulas just using natural language prompts rather than complicated formulas, and then to the actual analysis of the data is all AI driven. And then yes, obviously when it comes to autonomous sourcing, underpinning the autonomous agents to run those sourcing events end to end, it is all AI powered underneath the hood. So it is absolutely AI is littered throughout the solution and the product, to where it makes sense, right? Where we really truly believe it needs to be used to obviously increase those efficiencies and drive the best optimal outcomes when it comes to decision making.
And I love that, right? And I think I wanted to give you that opportunity because I always find like let's start with the business outcome and the characteristics of the sourcing or the spend we're trying to source, and then bring AI to the party, the different subdomains based on what is the best fit for what we're trying
Yeah.
to do here, right? All right, so we'll move on now to the discussion on the business case, but I know people often like to see a demo. We don't have one for you today, but if you want to see one, you can scan this QR code to see one and to further get Keelvar in on your conversation or show you deeper functionality if you're so interested, so inclined. But what we want to discuss is generally applicable to sourcing tools in general, or at least best in class sourcing tools, right? So how do we build a business case for a sourcing tool? That's the big question for today. And Toby, once again, I'd let you give us an overview of how Keelvar thinks about this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you can see here is a framework we use here at Keelvar. So the value consulting team here at Keelvar, we are a dedicated team to ensure that our customers and prospects can identify, quantify, and essentially realize the value from using a platform like Keelvar. So this all starts with an exercise we call the business value assessment. And this is really the foundation for building, a rich business case that's going to justify bringing in any kind of new technology. So it starts with really understanding in a lot of detail the current state. So what processes are in place, what tools do the teams use, which teams are actually involved in the process, and really what are the challenges and pain points of the current processes and tools today, and what are the implications of those challenges. And once we've got a very good understanding of that current state, it enables us to start designing the best future state, knowing the capabilities and requirements needed to get from that current state to that future state. And so in designing that future state, we can then start to assess, well, how does it link in with the surrounding ecosystem and different systems around it? What processes need to change? How do they need to change? How is that going to affect the teams that are using the tools and following these processes today? And ultimately, what are the benefits that we can realize from solving those pain points that we've looked into and analyzed as part of that current state analysis? And in doing so, that the ROI we always see is it's the icing on the cake, right? When we've done a good job of understanding the current state, the future state benefits, the ROI is the icing on the cake to bring that all together.
Yeah, and I love like the required capabilities box, right? Because I think you're probably coming at it from a technical capabilities, right? Like what can the tool do that we can't do today that's going to bring us value? But I think this exercise probably also helps you identify the human capabilities that are required. Maybe we need to upskill certain members of our team on digital literacy, digital skills, or to be able to also execute those processes once we've got the machine in place,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely, right. So it's going to affect different teams in different ways. And as we talked about the different elements of the platform, you're going to need different skill sets, whether it's tackling those very large strategic events compared to the high volume repetitive events that are automated, but setting up the agents in the first place, etc. So yeah, it requires obviously different skill sets. So that is absolutely important to take note of.
Very cool. So I think we'll focus probably more on the BVA side, right? Business value assessment in this call. But I love the fact that you're already thinking at the start, how do we measure this, right? How do we ensure that what the business case says is actually getting realized? And that's another important piece of building a business case and making it live on. So the first thing, right, is that benefits column. This is my perspective on it, right? You want to start by documenting your current state, your baseline, right? And these are the types of things you may want to start measuring, right? The number of sourcing events you're conducting per year and per type of event, right? Based on the definitions that Toby shared with us earlier. Average cycle times, number of FTE hours spent on these manual sourcing tasks and emails and spreadsheets and managing documents, which are less value add activities and more admin type activities that if we could automate, right, we could redeploy that capacity to higher value activities. Percentage of spend that's actually sourced today, right? And in a lot of organizations that are lower maturity, we're not even close to 80, 90, 100%. Right? How are we losing savings from auto renewals, from sourcing events that are skipped because we don't have the capacity to get to them? And how are we also, how could we better perform if we had price benchmarking in different categories and visibility into historical prices and being able to have market data to support our sourcing decisions, right? So these are the types of things that if you can start measuring, even if manually, right, to give yourself an idea of where you are, and then comparing that to benchmarks, you'll start seeing the potential for cost savings, for cost avoidance, if not because of the actual sourcing itself, because you're gaining productivity or spend under management, then you're able to redeploy that effort to more sourcing agent, more sourcing activities, right? And so as you start measuring this and comparing it to benchmarks, you'll see, oh, there are gaps. And if we close those gaps, there's a dollar sign attached to that on our end, right? So those are specific examples. And I know, Toby, you have a more, a broader view that you'd love to share with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've covered, some of the key ones there as well, but what we try and do as well is put them into categories. We talk about soft qualitative benefits and hard quantitative benefits, ones that we can really start to dig into the metrics and quantify where possible. And I think it's important to note different companies will see benefits differently as well. So it's important to really level set on that and understand, what is going to be seen as a hard benefit versus a soft benefit, and make sure we have that understanding of which category it goes into. And you can see here on the left, right, some what we call the soft qualitative benefits, like enhancing sustainability and improving governance and control, improving employee morale is an interesting one, right? The less manual, mundane sourcing tasks that teams have to do, the better, right? We want to take those away. So we've got those, and then on the right hand side, we've got ones that really we look to quantify, right? So optimizing the spend to drive those cost savings, as Joel mentioned, reducing that manual effort and putting that that extra capacity into more value add tasks, and then reducing maverick spend, for example. So these are ones where really we can start to put metrics and data points against and really start to understand how they can be improved over time by introducing an e-sourcing tool like Keelvar. And you can see in the middle there, right? So different elements of the platform, whether it's sourcing optimizer or automation, they will have different impacts on those benefits as well. So it's important to understand how each one of those changes the degree of those benefits and the size of those benefits as well.
And I love your point on like adapting it to the culture of the company, right? Because to your point earlier on retention or morale, I see that linked to retention rates. And so if I have high employee turnover, there's an HR cost there, right? To putting job postings up, like recruiting, interviewing, et cetera, right? So if you're able to put a dollar sign on that and say we're gonna be able to stop doing that if we boost employee morale and keep our our retention rate higher, that may play well in your company culture, right? I hope it doesn't come to that, right? But it's just to give an example. Whereas you may be in an indirect business, right? Financial services, banking, where it's more of a risk conversation, right? It's more of a compliance conversation, and yes, savings as well. But those risk elements can also be turned into dollar signs if certain things happen on a regular basis and they cost the business either from fines or potential fines or operational impacts as well of having to put overtime in or what have you. You can put a price around that and a mitigation percentage to be able to say, hey, if we're able to move these events from happening 6 times a year to 2 times a year, there's a value there, right, from a sourcing standpoint. And then also going back to the classic direct manufacturing, like price of raw material savings over the purchase price variance. So I think getting creative with it based on your company's culture is also the key to a successful business case. And I think we can illustrate that with another case study that's maybe even more important or concrete than my examples, right? So Toby, would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to walk you through this. So I don't think this company needs any introduction. So Maersk being one of the global leaders in the logistics space, and they had a lot of challenges when it came to their sourcing practices. And you can imagine the scale of Maersk's operations. It demanded very rapid and efficient sourcing across many categories, whether it be direct, indirect materials to raw materials to logistics, right? And their processes were very manual before Keelvar, and they were very fragmented. And I think it was explained that actually they simply couldn't keep up with the pace of the business using their traditional methods. And so we had to address, going back to kind of that spend profile, we had to address the very large complex sourcing events. all the way down to the very high volume, tactical ad hoc requests that were coming in, 1 or 2 line items. So that's exactly, what we did with Keelvar. We used sourcing optimizer for the very large strategic events and autonomous sourcing for those high volume tactical ad hoc requests. And you can see some of the results here, which are pretty impressive. So just in their first month alone, they ran 200 RFPs. So very quick to get going, very quick to value realization. And in just 1 year, they ran 3,000 sourcing events, which they would never have been able to do using their current methods manually today. And actually, I can say, I think the current time today, they're running almost 1,000 a month, I would say now. So it's really ramping up in terms of the event volume. And since Maersk has been using Keelvar, they've optimized $65 billion spend through the platform. So huge numbers here that we're talking about, and 60% of requests are now fully automated. So using those autonomous sourcing agents, they can be automated end to end, and you can imagine the time that frees up. From sourcing cycles that used to take weeks or days to now hours for some of those smaller events, to then completely automated. It frees up that time for that team to then focus on more strategic tasks and strategic sourcing. So you find that more effort then goes in the strategic sourcing side of things, and the volume of those sourcing optimizer events then starts to increase as well, and as you bring more spend into that strategic space. So we're seeing amazing results there, and you can just see the power then of those two solutions working together and addressing that full spectrum of spend.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's striking to me on there is 30,000 bidders, right? Because to me, one of the big pulls or long pulls in the tent when you're deploying any ProcureTech solution that involves suppliers is like supplier onboarding and adoption of suppliers of your solution, right? And so, that just signals to me that you've thought through the supplier experience as well, right? And having it be seamless. Otherwise, you would not have 30,000 bidders in these number of sourcing events, right? And I don't know.
And the funny story is that Maersk actually they saw Keelvar from being a supplier on the supplier side of things, and they loved it so much, and they said, "Hey, why don't we use this from a buying perspective?" And that's how they came to know Keelvar. So absolutely.
So I think that's just want to call that out, right? If you're looking at sourcing solutions, don't just think as well of your, one of the key assumptions of your business case is that suppliers are going to adopt this, right, and help you achieve your objectives. So making sure that that's the case with their user experience, and maybe even testing it out with suppliers. So it's software with a service, which I always love, right? Because it's all about reorganizing the way that you work, and sometimes you need service in some respects to help you achieve that. And I think the last point we want to make here, right, which I think is super important, is the key to success is co-creation, right? So if you as procurement are driving your business case or writing your business case in a silo, in an Excel file in the corner, you're going to have a tougher time getting the project approved, in my experience, than if you bring along your stakeholders for the journey, right? So procurement, IT, finance, and risk, right? Getting benchmarking firms involved externally as well, so that you can make the case that there is a gap between your performance and what is attainable in the market. Consulting support, right? So from people such as myself to help you accelerate the thinking, and or from the software vendor if they provide it, and then the software vendor themselves, right? So Toby, you mentioned like your role with value consulting is not sales, right? It's helping people build these business cases. And I think a lot of software vendors realize that genuinely helping is the key to success, right? I think one of your colleagues mentioned the analogy of like going to the doctor and then not telling the doctor what your symptoms are, and then asking for a prescription, right? And asking for pricing, so to speak, right? So I think being able to open up with software vendors on what your numbers are, right, and what you're trying to achieve is the best way to get a realistic business case, and not just like a copy paste from a generic slide, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it goes back to that trust relationship, right? So the vendor's going to have the expertise around their solution, their product, their capabilities. As the customer, they're going to have the expertise around their business, right? But you need that trust on both sides to say, well, we need that knowledge sharing to be able to design what that future optimum state is going to look like, going back to that framework, right? If you don't have that that trust kind of equation, then you're probably not going to get to that optimum future state because you're going to be lacking knowledge in one of those two areas. So I totally agree. And one of the easy ways that we try to use as part of the business case is making sure each benefit has an owner, so that you're really involving the stakeholders and it's their targets and goals that they're trying to strive towards as well.
Yeah, I like that. And it kind of touches on that second point, which is, I think the best business case is a business case in which you've got all the stakeholders at the table and they all believe in it, right?
Yeah.
And so even if you've got these high potential ROIs, dialing them back and saying you own the benefit and you believe that you can deliver on that benefit is with everybody involved, is the best way to make sure that you've got executive sponsorship, right? Cool. I've got some common objections here, which I don't think we'll have time for, but I just want to flash them on screen here. If you're looking for, you're hitting walls building your business case, this is something that you can refer to as, the counters and the reframes to certain typical objections. And as we're getting towards time here, I just want to recap, the discussion that Toby and I had around the current state, letting pain drive, right? Pain always sells more than potential benefit. So think of that as you're soliciting stakeholders within your business. Document your baselines, go get these benchmarks externally to see what the gap is between your performance and a benchmark. Elaborate your benefits model, as we spent the lion's share of the time on it, but it's really around making sure that contextually in your company with the culture there, that you've built a model that resonates, and that everything can lead back to dollars if you're creative enough about how to measure it. And then co-create the business case, right? The best business case is the business case that people believe in. And there's a comment in the chat here, which I'll bring from Jackson. One of the biggest elements of this is change management. I recently worked on an implementation, and despite a clear business case, the team struggled to sell the solution in some regions that were not as tech savvy. So that really needs to be a focus. And I'm really glad you say that, Jackson, because we will cover that with the Keelvar team later on in the season. So it's an excellent point, and it comes back to co-creating at the very start of the initiative. And then lastly, as we wrap up here, I just want to give Toby and myself an opportunity to say where you can find out more, right? So if you want to see the other episodes that are coming up in the season, get the invitations. There's a QR code for you to sign up to the Pure Procurement newsletter. And then I'll let you, Toby, let us know where we can find Keelvar.
Yeah, absolutely. So just there on the right, if you scan that QR code, it will give you, an asset which talks about that framework and building your business case, but also making sure that you continue to measure the value and also the benefits, and really how to measure those benefits. What are some of the key data points and metrics that you should be looking for to help quantify and assess those benefits? So yeah, please go check it out.
And I think that's a great call to action because, as we covered all how to build the business case, but then measuring the business case, we could probably do a whole other show on, and we might. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, this week. We'll talk to you again next week when Fair Market comes on to discuss with us, architectures, how we should think about putting sourcing tools into our existing IT architectures. If you have ERPs, if you don't have ERPs and just a finance system, if you have intake tools, don't have intake tools, etc. So tune in next week for that really interesting discussion as well. And thank you, Toby and the Keelvar team for coming on today.
Thanks, Joe.
Talk to you soon.